Hey, hey, hey. Just trying to find our drawings for today that we're looking at. Hello everyone. Good to see you guys joining in. I'm just trying to pull up our artist references for today. For some reason it's struggling to pop up like normal. I'm just gonna grab it. Had some issues with this before, but I'm sure it will magically appear in a second. Okay, here we are, great. So I'm gonna keep it like that for us. Maybe I will. Oh. Hi everyone, sorry about that little starter. Good to see you signed on. While people are joining, I'll just tell you what I've got today. So we're doing a portraiture session. Very simply, you need to have pencil, paper, eraser, rubber, and sharpener. Similarly to last week, or the other night actually, I've got a 4B and a 2B, and I'll be using my 4B for slightly darker, heavier mark making, and my 2B when I want a slightly sharper, more sensitive line. I wrote on the materials list that you need to have a photo of somebody not looking at the camera. Got an example I found, the New Barn book, this kind of image where they're not looking straight on at the camera. You can use something like that, or you can just draw from the artist images that we're going to be using. So I'll be doing that as my example. So hopefully nobody's going to struggle with something to draw for, because we'll always have an image in this class today. So we've done portraiture sessions a few times. We haven't done one on the live classes probably since around June, I think. I think that's when we did our last portraiture sessions. So some of you may have joined for those. We're looking at a few different techniques today, so even if you did join for those, this will be quite new. If you didn't join for those, we should be working at a pace where anybody could pick up the skills and stuff that we're going to try today. Okay, I think we can begin. So make sure your pencil's sharp as ever. And we are going to try to familiarise ourselves with the proportions of the face that we're drawing. So if you are going to draw from your photograph or your magazine picture or whatever it is you're using, just make sure that you've got it in front of you close enough that you can see the details on the face. If you want to use the image that I've got up there, feel free to use that. Okay, what we're going to do is we are going to do a left-hand drawing. So we're taking a line for a walk, which means that when my pencil goes down on my page, I don't lift it off for the entire drawing. We're taking a line for a walk and we're starting with our left hand, okay? So what I would suggest is put your pencil on the page on the left-hand side. I'll just get my timer up. And when I say start, you are not going to lift your pencil from the page. You're allowed to look at your drawing as you do it, but you can't lift your pencil off. So it needs to be in your left hand. When I say left hand, it just should be in your non-dominant hand. Okay, we've got 1 minute. Off you go. So I'm starting this portrait around the ear, and I'm working the way down the side of the head. Moving back and forward between looking and drawing. Because you're not taking your pencil off the page, you'll have some places where the lines kind of cross and go back and forth. But you shouldn't get as lost as we sometimes do when we're doing blind contour drawings, because you're allowed to look. So just make sure that you keep looking at your original portrait. 5 seconds left. And stop. Fantastic. I didn't get through the whole thing, and I imagine you wouldn't have either. So I started from this hand side and I was working myself round. What I'm going to do for this second minute is I'm going to stay on the same drawing, continuing to use my non-dominant hand. So for me, that's my left hand. But I'm going to now start on the right of the image. So these two lines will hopefully overlap with each other. So I'll start on the right of my image, start my timer, and off you go. It's so nice to see some familiar names. You've had half a minute. Twenty seconds left. And 3, 2, 1, and stop. Fab. So you won't be able to see probably which line was which, but my first minute I started on this side and I wove my way around. And then on my other minute, I started from the other hand side and they kind of joined up in the middle. So even though this doesn't look like the portrait I'm drawing, it has familiarized me a little bit more to the proportions that I'm seeing in that face. So we're going to do that again, but this time we're going to take 3 minutes. We're going to use our dominant hand. So if you are normally right-handed, return to your right hand like me. If you're normally left-handed, return to your left hand. We'll have 3 minutes taking a line for a walk with the hand we normally write or draw with. Okay, so put your pencil down. You can start either side this time, left or right. I'm going to start on the left again. I'll start my timer. So having a little bit more time with this one should mean that you're able to pick up a lot more of the detailing of the portrait. You're back with your dominant hand, so I'm imagining you'll find this a little bit more comfortable, but we're still challenging ourselves to take the line for a walk. So we've still got some hurdles and obstacles in our way, which actually help to really make the most of a warm-up exercise. I think when there's a few hurdles, it just speeds up the demand for our looking. Okay, you've had almost a minute. Remember not to lift your pencil off the page. Just keep weaving your pencil around to create these contour lines that, even if you're having to weave around patches that aren't a definite line, you're almost creating like a map of their face with this continuous line. Mine is looking a little bit clowny, gone for a massive mouth. One minute left. So if you feel like you're nearly done, slow down the pace with which you are moving your pencil at. Don't lift it off the page yet. And just try and make some really clear decisions about where you need to add some more detail. Don't just add detail everywhere just because you've got the time. Try to be intentional about how you're doing it. "40 seconds left. We're in the last 30 seconds now. and 15 seconds, almost there. Last 5 seconds. And stop. Fantastic. Okay, what we're going to do just for a moment, you will see mine a little bit scary and clown-like, this one. It reminds me of the Joker in Batman. Terrifying. What we're going to do is just take a look at this second, kind of your second 3-minute drawing that you did with your dominant hand, and we're going to take 1 minute. I want you to look back at the portrait that you're drawing, and I just want you don't need to make any adjustments. I just want you to literally look at it and think, where is this looking accurate and where is this not looking accurate? So I'll talk you through mine as I'm doing it. So I can see that in the portrait I'm drawing from, actually the eyes are on a slight angle, whereas I've drawn them so that they're level, but they're more slightly at an angle. I can see that I have made the mouth much too big and the chin too small. So I need to make sure that I'm careful with the size of this space. And then one of the cheeks I've really enlarged. But the side of the head is pretty in proportion, I think, and the angles of the shoulder look about right. So do the same with yours. Just compare your drawing to the portrait that you're copying and just have a look. If you're happy making notes on yours, you could just write a few kind of thoughts about where you need to tweak it or whatever in the next one. And then we're going to start approaching these drawings. So what we're going to begin with is we're actually going to try to map out the portrait that we're drawing from with a grid-like structure, a really light grid-like structure. So it's slightly different on the portrait of the artist inspiration that we've got there and the one that I'm drawing from. So the artist inspiration drawing that we've got there is completely side on. So this is a drawing of Manet's, and it's a side profile, and everything is completely on this plane. Whereas in the portrait that I was drawing for my warm-ups, it's not completely perfectly side on. I can actually see 2 eyes in the photograph I was drawing from. So whichever way your, whatever your portrait, whatever angle they're on, you're going to have to think about this slightly differently. But what I would suggest you do to begin with is you're going to draw a really light square grid down the middle of your page, like this. So I've done a really, really light square. Now what you need to decide is what on your image falls centrally on that point. So if we use the image that I've put in the top right hand corner, it's probably to the right of the ear and to the left of the cheekbone. So now I'm going to start looking at what is along that line, and I'm going to start adding in the detail. So I'm going to use this artist inspiration so you will know what I'm referring to. It'll slightly help. So first of all, I'm just putting some quick information on my page to say where everything falls. So the cheekbones like that. So this won't make any sense to you yet, but I've just drawn these little markers on for the side of the head, for the ear, for the nose. And that's what you need to do. You need to start mapping out along this grid. You can also add in a few more lines. So instead of dividing it into 4, you could think about dividing it into 9 or even more than that. And that actually, I find that helpful to do if I do a few more lines across. So doing this very roughly. This is not a precise way of approaching it. We're not being really particular. We're just literally trying to get an idea of the proportions. So here I know that the top of the head goes slightly above this and the bottom of the chin goes slightly below this. So I'm going to take about 3 minutes to do that together. So hopefully you've drawn out your grid and you're beginning with that. So remember where you said that middle point was. I said that it was between the ear and the cheekbone. You're constantly coming back to that. So think along what is along the plane that's in line with that middle point. So the nose, the cheekbone, the ear, the back of the head. And then what am I seeing down this way? So I'm seeing the top of the head, the hairline, a few of the wrinkles on the side of the head. And then we start to get into the top of the beard and then almost the neckline. So work along those two planes of horizontal and vertical as you map this out. Just got 1 minute left. So don't feel the need to rush with details. This is all about checking just proportionally where everything lies. I'm checking on the angle of the nose, that's about straight. The eyebrows are about straight. Okay, last 30 seconds. Last 10 seconds. Okay, and stop. So I'll show you what I got to. I struggled actually quite a lot because the image, if you're drawing from that artist inspiration, it's very, very small, so it's hard to get the details. But I just tried to work out, like I said, along these planes, what lines up with one another, what sits above each other. And then some of the common mistakes that happen is it's very easy to kind of work along the side of a profile one side, then along the side another side, and for your image actually to almost shrink in the middle. So just check right now that your neck is not too thin. Check the space between the ear and the nose. This often either gets too big or too small. Just have a look back at your image that you're drawing from and just check those proportions. And then the last kind of key one I think to look for is that space between the ear and the back of the head. That's often bigger than people think, okay? If I turn sideways, the ear is much more central than you might imagine. So that might have been really helpful for you. You might feel that actually that did not set you up well for the next thing. So whatever you want to do, you can either continue working on that light map, or you could completely start again if you feel like you went a little bit astray with that. So what we'll do, we are going to add we're now going to think about mark making. So like we've done previously, we're going to do 5 boxes on the side of the page or the top of the page, but this time we're not going to look at a variety of light to dark in shading. We're going to think about different ways of mark making. So if I just make this big, I know you can't see every single bit of it because my face covers a bit, but using that artist inspiration as our reference point, we're going to we'll just take 3 minutes for this. I want you to try and capture different ways of mark making that they've used in those 5 boxes. So I am going to do one box, which is just black with graphite, because there are some spaces on that drawing that they've used the graphite really heavily, and so it's almost appearing as just black. So I know that that is visible in that drawing. Okay, so we've just got one box that for me is filled with tone. I'm going to do another box that has these kind of sweeping lines, which he's done for the hair, but you can also see on the side of the face. And they aren't perfectly kind of parallel with each other. I can also see areas of cross-hatching, okay? Which is where you have lines that are going in one direction and lines that are going in another direction. We can also see some of the cross-hatching is where the lines are straight and they're intersecting like this. In other places, because of the contouring that he's done for the face, like with the cheekbone, the lines are almost curved as they overlay with each other. So you might want to try and capture that in one of your boxes as well. So I'll show you what I've got. This is just simply getting us to really think about our language of mark making. So I've got a really dark box. I've got just these soft sweeping lines for the hair off the side of the face. We've got very solid cross-hatching here, and then these are the more curved lines that intersect. See if you can find another way that he uses mark making to describe the portrait. It doesn't look like there are any areas where he's used pointillism, which is just when you use dots. We can see places like with the beard where it's just short, sharp, linear lines that are pointing out. But see if you can find another area on this image of mark making. I think we've predominantly got cross-hatching and these sweeping lines. So in my last box, I'm just going to do these little spiky, tiny lines, which we can see at the beard. Okay, so I've done it like that. Now these exercises, when we break down an image like this, they can be a little bit frustrating and feel like we're returning to school. But the idea is that we're just stretching ourselves. Okay, we're stretching ourselves to grow in the language of mark making we're using and not always depending on the same marks. So we're going to have 15 minutes now, and you could start afresh with your drawing, or you could continue to work on this map that you've got, and we're going to try and incorporate similar mark making to this Manet drawing that we're being inspired by. So I'll put it back in the corner there. I'll set the timer for 15 minutes and we'll get going. I'm going to return to the photograph I'm using and not do it from that one because it's just too small for me. Okay, so I'm going to lightly do just going to map out mine first because I'm starting again. One of the biggest challenges with portraiture is that you might be able to make it look like a face, but sometimes just capturing likeness is really challenging. And really the only thing I can say to that is practice, practice, practice. I had years of drawing portraits that didn't look like the person I was trying to draw. And then one day it just clicked. But even then, some days it feels like I could try over and over again and I still won't capture the likeness. So it does kind of go in fits and starts a little bit for me. You might consistently find it really easy to capture likeness, but from my experience, most people have challenges with it at some point in their life. So don't be discouraged if you feel like portraits just aren't your thing. Just keep practicing. If you are looking and you're using these skills of referencing different features to the other features on the face, that will help you capture likeness, because quite often somebody can capture an eye perfectly, but if they put the eye too far away from the other eye, suddenly they lose the likeness. Okay, so if you were mapping out your face, hopefully you've got that down now, and you can start to look at adding in some of this mark making. Make sure that your pencil's sharp, unless you're particularly wanting quite a blunt, smudgy look. But we don't see much of that in that Manet drawing. Most of this is sharp mark making. So I'm first of all trying to pick out the darkest parts of the portrait, and I'm using some of the really close cross-hatching techniques, or the just really dark areas of solid shading to get these shadows in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it big again so you can keep looking back to how Manet uses his marks. The second artist that we're looking at today uses line in a much lighter way with a lot less shading. So if this isn't quite your favourite style, we will be looking at a different way of approaching portraiture. You might also want to think about whether it's light or dark behind the portrait. So for me, there's a very dark area behind, whereas with the Manet drawing, he's just left the white paper. So you can also think about that. So if you've just stuck with one technique up till now, try and challenge yourself to move into a different technique. So for example, I'm just going to try and find areas where I can use those sweeping lines and not use cross-hatching. So if anyone's got any questions, feel free to write them in the chat box down there. So mine's definitely still in the early stages, but hopefully you can see that I've got a mixture of mark making in my drawing. I've got very straight lines, I've got these sweeping lines, I've got some cross-hatching going on, and short, sharp lines. So try to use a variety of marks. I'm finding side profile portraiture more tricky than front facing. Is that normal? Absolutely. As I'm teaching this, I'm feeling like I need a lot more practice with side profiles. Yeah, don't be discouraged. We actually rarely think about side profiles with portraiture often. Well, maybe you don't, but I often have drawn people front on. So it's literally just boils down to practice and experience. And I've just drawn people in this posture less than when they're facing the camera. So very normal. If anyone's finding this easier than drawing somebody front on, I'd be very interested to know. Okay, we have 7 minutes left, so just refer back to the Manet again. Are you using some of the marks that you see in his, or have you literally just stuck to your normal mark making? Try and challenge yourself to use different ways of capturing tone than you normally would. Even if it is a disaster and you don't like the end result, that's okay, because this is just about expanding your toolkit, essentially, expanding those ways of capturing tone that you keep tucked up your sleeve. Okay, I'm going to try and speed up a bit so that this is a little bit more finished in this time. Definitely finding this easier than drawing someone front on. Not sure why, but pleasantly surprised. Very good to hear, Emmy. I think you might be outnumbered by people finding it slightly harder, but that's encouraging to hear. As ever, I'd love to see photographs of everyone's drawings at the end of this class, including like the stages of how you mapped out your portrait and how the drawing progressed. If you've taken photographs through it, don't feel like you only need to send one. Okay, last 5 minutes. I'll show you where I've got to here. I've started really trying to get in these areas of shadow on the side of the face, using these straight lines, some more curved lines. I think I need to do a little bit more cross-hatching to echo Manet. Now remember, you have got your rubber if you want to use it to bring back some areas of your paper to shine through. I don't really use rubbers that often. I think they can work really well though if you do use them, so don't feel like you can't use it. I think I had a teacher when I was young who challenged us not to use rubbers so that we grew more confident in just placing down lines and not overthinking it. And ever since then, I've just always veered towards using rubbers as little as possible. But there are some artists that use rubbers in a way that just adds such a beautiful sensitivity to their drawing and also captures light in an amazing way. Now, something to warn you about, teeth can always be an incredibly scary thing to do. You end up adding the lines of the teeth and suddenly you've got this terrifying figure. I would say do really light lines. If you're trying to capture the shadow in between teeth, just do it as lightly as possible, as opposed to drawing really obvious individual teeth. Okay, last 3 minutes. As you can hear, I'm speeding up a little bit just to try and get down as much of the tone as I can in this time. but don't feel like you have to rush, because you can always spend a little bit longer on this later. Okay, for these last 2 minutes, once again, just take a pause. Try squinting your eyes at the portrait that you're drawing and then at your portrait. I find that often helps to see where there's a mismatch of tone. So for example, the darks and the lights become more obvious when you squint your eyes. So just try and compare your drawing to the photograph and see where you need to add more light, where you need to add more dark. And obviously the only way of adding light is by using your rubber. So you might need to go in and do that for this last 2 minutes. We're on to our final minute. Okay, and get to a point where you feel happy pausing, and then we'll stop. So I'm quite happy with my variety of mark making. It's proportionally got a few places that need tweaking. So if I had longer and I was doing this on my own, I would make sure that I can go back to the initial stages, and I would just take a little bit longer with mapping that out. That can really help. If you just carry on with something a little bit wrong, that straight away will lose likeness. And so impatience will just mean that if you don't take long enough with those early stages of your portrait, you will probably end up feeling quite frustrated with that lack of likeness. Let's move on to the second artist that we're looking at today, which is a beautiful Degas drawing. Let me just pull it up for us. Here we go. So this is the whole of a figure, and we can see them sitting in a chair with a hat on their lap. But if I enlarge it so you can see the type of marks that he uses, this is more in the mid-tones than any dark tones. There's very little really dark in there. We can see with this drawing that there are places where a rubber has been used. If you look at the hat on the lap, you can see that maybe a putty rubber's been used to lift some of that graphite off. Now, you can either just think about this or you can write it in the comments. How does this drawing differ to the last one that we did? How does it differ? So if you were to draw in this style, what would you do differently? You can have a think about that, or you can write that in the comments. So I think with this drawing, we can see a little bit more of his thinking. We can see some of the lines that have been disregarded, especially on the coat. There are some lines there that are almost like helping to map out where the lapel should go, but aren't quite in the right place. So we still see hints of it, but it just hasn't been emphasized as much. Seems to be very little cross-hatching. Yeah, exactly. This is much more just simple linear, and then some light areas of shading without the complexity of mark making that we saw in the Manet. Okay, so that's why we started with that one, because there was much more variety, whereas this one is just much more sensitive line drawing with a few areas of shading. If you look particularly at the face, which I know I'm slightly covering some of it, you'll see that it looks really like a real person, but there's not very many defining features on the skin. That's pretty much just been left blank. So with the eyes and the nose and the ear, those have been really carefully placed to capture the likeness of this man. Fantastic. So we're going to take our last 15 minutes drawing our portrait again in the style of Degas' drawing. So it will look very different to your initial drawing. And what I'm imagining is that you will have areas that you've rubbed out, you'll have some lines that don't feel quite right, but don't feel like you need every line that's left on your page to be perfect, because that's part of the charm of this drawing, is that some of the lines aren't quite right, but they just add up to the character that he's developed. Okay, so I'm going to try drawing this Degas drawing, because we can see much more of the figure than in the portrait that I've got, but it's totally your choice. You can just focus on the face, or you could draw the whole of the body, whatever challenge you want to set yourself today. So I'm actually going to set this for about 11 or 12 minutes, so we have a bit of time at the end. So off you go. Make sure that your pencil is really sharp. So I told you that I was swapping between a 4B and a 2B. I'm now moving back to my 2B because it's a lighter drawing with sharper marks in some places. I've taught this technique before, but sometimes holding up my pencil and just kind of lining up with some of the angles, then comparing it on my page, helps me just check that I've got things at the right angle. Okay, so for example, I might just hold it up to my original photograph and go, okay, it's the chin's at that angle, okay, and then I'll lie it on my page and go, yeah, I've got that right, or no, that's completely off. And it just helps you see if you're translating photograph to drawing accurately. Now, if there are artists that you love the work of, don't feel like you can't draw straight from their drawings like I'm doing here to give us an example. It can be really good practice to draw directly from artists' work. I don't think of it as copying, but as a way of transcripting somebody's work into your own work. You obviously need to give them credit if you're copying it exactly, but many artists do copies of other artists' work. We've looked at some of those before. I'll try and find some for a future class. Some of your style will always come through. So the main focus of this second drawing is not for it to be absolutely perfect, absolutely capturing likeness, but more about capturing the difference in this mark making. So you want it to be these sensitive sweeping lines and not as dark as your first drawing. We've got 7.5 minutes left. I'm going to suggest we all just pause where we are. And again, just take a moment before you've got too stuck into this drawing to return kind of to this map making way of approaching. So choose the central point on your drawing and the central point on your page. Just check what's along that vertical line and what's along that horizontal line. And just make any tweaks and changes that you feel you need to make. So I need to slightly move my arm. I've put the elbow a bit too low. If you catch the kind of small errors now, it prevents them getting much bigger and more obvious later on. Okay, and when you feel like you've accurately kind of adjusted and tweaked, you can continue. And once again, if you've got any questions, feel free to write it in the box. Remember to keep your pencil sharp if you haven't sharpened it yet and it's got a bit blunt. Make sure you're sharpening it. Now, some days I feel like drawing just comes easy, other days much more challenging, and this is probably a challenging day for me. So if you're having the same kind of day where it just feels like it's not quite working as you hoped, don't worry, those days happen. Sometimes, truthfully, if I'm having one of those days, I will just give up for a while, go and do something else and then return to it. Other days I try and push through, it really depends on the day. But I think everyone has them. Maybe there are some people that exist that always have amazing drawing days, but not me. The next portraiture class that we're going to be doing, I'll release the date for that soon, is going to be self-portraiture. So you'll need to have a mirror for that. And for those that are finding it trickier drawing things side on, hopefully that will alleviate that challenge. But Emmy, for you, maybe it'll be more challenging to do a self-portrait front on. What I found really helpful last time we did a self-portraiture class is I used like a Pilates exercise mat under the mirror so it didn't slip. Because I was using a big wall mirror, I didn't have a little one. So that might help you when you're setting up for next class. Okay, just 3.5 minutes left. Show you where I've got to with this. So in some places I've added the lines a little bit too heavy. But you can see that this is pretty drastically different to my last drawing, where the marks were much heavier and there was more of a variety. Here it's a lighter, more sensitive way of using my graphite pencil. If you notice on the face, he's really got these kind of almost wispy lines to suggest the hair and the beard. So don't feel like every line has to be super sharp because some of his are quite wispy. Okay, last 2 minutes. So think about what bits you need to focus on for this to feel complete by the end of these 2 minutes. Might be just a few marks you need to make for it to have that sense of completion, or it might need to be quite a big area of shading, even if it's just light shading. And the final minute, almost there now. I love the expression on this man's face and the way that Degas drawn features with such sensitivity. It's just beautiful, I think. It's my favourite bit on the drawing is his brow. Last 10 seconds. And stop. Okay, fantastic. Well done, everyone. So let's just take this artist image off. Fantastic. So this is where I got to. Some bits worked better than others. I'm quite happy with the face, actually. I think I have captured some of that sensitivity, but things aren't placed as accurately as I would like. So just take a moment to reflect on yours, and then if you write in the chat box whether you preferred style 1 or style 2, I'd love to hear your thoughts and why. I personally much preferred style 2. I really like the almost ghostly qualities of those lines. And I especially like how that image was done on off-white paper, so that's worth considering what colour paper you use. I find that the first style is really good for kind of stretching me to use heavy mark making, but I just personally prefer that second style. The next class that we'll be doing on Portraiture will be, like I said, self-portraits. So even though that can be a bit challenging drawing yourself, it also can be fun. Prefer doing style 2, but I think my style 1 looks better. I'd be really interested to see those photos, Emmy. Style 1 personally because it's easier to mask mistakes. Yeah, that's true. With style 1 you just kind of go over with heavy mark making and it's almost hidden. Grace, you found both just as challenging. I personally found today's artist inspirations really challenging, and just portraiture in general after drawing other things for so long was hard. So the general vibe is finding style 1 easier, but some people preferred style 2 more. Fab. Well, I would love to see both of your drawings, so if you're happy taking a photograph, sending it to me, I will post them anonymously. If you want me to look at it but you don't want me to post it even anonymously, just say that in a message. If you enjoyed today's class and want to donate, I will put my giving information on my story, but it's also found in one of my highlights. There's no pressure to give, and I hope that I get to see lots of you at a future class. It was so good having you join to draw together today. Thanks everyone. Have a wonderful Saturday. Bye.